I will say I just did a coaching call myself and Zoom kicked me off like 3 times. So worst case scenario, I'll use my phone, but I thought it was I had too many tabs open, but now I'm wondering if it's I just turned on my computer. Like I just sat down,
Oh,
turned on my computer, went to Zoom, and like too many
right.
things were loading of like, hey, do you need
Yeah, yeah,
OneDrive? Yeah.
right, right.
And then also I shall be chewing gum because that is what is soothing my throat the best and makes me not a
Uh-huh.
coughing monster. So
Right.
two things that may or may not go very well tonight, but we are here. I gotta make sure
Okay.
I don't get too enthusiastic too, because that's the other thing that'll make me cough.
Right. Oh, and coughing is the worst because you can't control it, and
Yeah.
when
And
it
it's
once
just
it
happening.
starts, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna, pretend this is my kindergartners earlier and have a much more like, we're gonna talk down here today, kids. Okay. Oh my goodness. So, I will go ahead and get started because then, you can watch the replay too. Oh, there he is. Okay. So once again, I have my very fancy, uh, does this show up backwards or can you read it?
It's right. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good. Just making sure. It's showing up backwards for me, but I know what the words are, so it's fine. So the very first, most basic thing you can possibly do in a coaching session or when you're trying to manage your mind and not spin out in drama or spin in confusion. Um, the first step, which it's so powerful and it's somewhat easy to learn how to do on your own, is separating the thought facts from your thoughts about them. Separate the stories from the facts, right? So of course, that's like the magic of coaching is when you can apply something in your own life without your coach there, right? Like maybe you can hear the voice in your head going like, okay, but this is this and that is that, right? But you can do it yourself. Um, so this everything in the world, everything in your brain, everything in the world breaks down into 5 categories. Circumstances, which is the facts, thoughts, which is the stories, feelings or emotions, your actions that you take, and the results that come from that. And a lot of times it is hard to see the results. And actions do break down into some specific categories, but to keep it simple for tonight, I was going to just focus on circumstances, thoughts, and feelings because once you can start noticing those, then you start having a handle on where your problems are coming from. And so circumstances or facts are, oh, I was going to say too, I always say this is like decluttering your brain, right? So this is the equivalent of being able to look in a messy room and go, that goes in the trash. That's dishes. That's laundry. These toys go together. And I don't know. So, and I'm like, that seems so basic, but that's part of why my husband gets super overwhelmed by the toys because he doesn't know that this little fireman goes with this fire truck or this is a whole game that goes together. It's just like, what are all these pieces? And then like separating out trash and dishes, right? Today, I think might have been the first day at work that we have real silverware, but with foam styrofoam bowls, because we have like a dishwasher in our fancy new kitchen now, right? So we're trying out, like, can we have some real stuff? And it was legit, like, nope, don't throw away your spoon. Don't throw away your spoon. So like these are skills that you might have in real life, like decluttering things physically. And it is totally possible to have the same skills mentally and not have things be so chaotic. So let me explain. Facts are the things that literally everyone can agree on. That's the thing that I come back to because it's like, well, what's that one outlier person who could argue with this? So, for example, murder is bad is not a fact. It is an opinion because serial killers probably think murder is great, fine, whatever. Or like a little bit less silly, in the time of war, there are a whole bunch of people who are really, really smart in the highest levels of government who get together and talk about murdering a key person to win the war faster, right? Um, and also just the fact that murder is bad has an adjective in it is a hint that it should go in the thought line. So that's where we put like opinions, reactions, anything that makes things colorful, adjectives and adverbs, right? And so facts are the things that have no adjectives, no skew, no commentary. You could prove it in a court of law. So Osama bin Laden was killed on May 2nd, 2011. It's the name, what happened, the date. Very factual. Can't tell how anyone feels about it. No editorializing, no drama. And so like murder is an extreme example, right? But here's a little bit more of a practical example. So let's say you have a meeting coming up and you're dreading it. You're sure it's going to be a disaster. It is not going to go well. It's going to be a huge blow up, blah, blah, blah. So we X out that last part of everything I just said, and we get down to the facts that I have a meeting with X person at X time on X date. Or maybe like the accounting department and the HR department at this company are meeting at this time. And you can't even add things like the meeting agenda was stated to be, quote from an email, right? That, you could pull up the email in the court of law and be like, yes, we sent this email. This was the plan, right? And so that goes for like quotes for what a person said would go in the circumstance line. But then like, they're so mean and dramatic or whatever would be your thought about it. So into the thought line. So something happens, right? There's a meeting. Then you have a thought about it. And that's where all of the drama goes, where it's going to be a disaster. It's not going to go well. And when you're thinking those thoughts, the feeling that you're having is dread. So if you miss everything else in this whole course, hear this. Your thoughts create your feelings. So every feeling you have comes from one sentence in your brain. And it feels like the meeting is the thing that is creating the dread, but that's just not true, because somebody else attending that meeting could have the same exact meeting on their calendar, but they could either have no thoughts about it because like, whatever, I don't even care, and just feel super neutral about it. Or they could be looking forward to it, thinking like, oh, I'm so glad we're going to get some clarity. Like maybe you're super conflict averse and they're like diving into the conflict, like, let's figure this out. Come on. And they're feeling super motivated or like excited for the meeting, right? So it can't be the meeting that's creating the dread. It is your thoughts about the meeting. And so going back to death, it's not the circumstances that affect your life. It's your thoughts about it. So someone at church just mentioned that they just found out that a childhood best friend passed away 3 years ago, right? And so if circumstances were what made us feel things, somehow 3 years ago, you would have had a feeling of like, oh my gosh, something is sad, right? But you weren't sad for 3 years, right? It was when you heard about it and had a thought about it that you became sad about it. And if I heard like just the facts of that childhood best friend passing away, of like X person died on X date, I would have zero thoughts about it and I would have zero feelings about it. And that doesn't make me a terrible, cold person. It's just I don't have any connection to that name. It doesn't mean anything to me. And the thing is, this isn't supposed to, again, going back to what we talked about last week, I'm not saying this so that you can just feel happy all the time of like, oh yeah, my friend is gone. Woohoo. Like, no, there are bad feelings, negative feelings that we want to feel in the world sometimes, right? Like we want to feel disappointed. Like I would choose to feel disappointed if, I don't get the job I wanted, right? Or, if my parents pass away, I want to feel sad about that, right? So it's not that we're manipulating and just being stuck in toxic positivity of like, no, I'm happy. I'm thinking happy thoughts. There are things that we want to have negative emotions about, and that it's okay to feel those negative emotions, right? So I have a couple more examples, but does anybody have any drama happening in your day that you would like me to separate out the facts from the stories?
I think like one thing could be I'm doing this thing tonight where I'm talking on a Zoom like you are, except, I'm talking
Right.
and it's just really short, but I keep thinking, having all these thoughts about it,
Yeah.
and just
Well, what
hearing
are
you
the
talk, I'm
feelings
like,
you're having about
yeah, well, I
it?
go back, I go like all over the place, like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm like literally reading off of a paper. It's not like I'm making something up on the spot, or
Yeah.
it's like a quiz show where I have to answer questions or something. But then I've had people like, say, one person said, I can't wait to I can't wait for you to share your story with the world. And I was like, the world? I wasn't thinking about the world.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
it's
So how
really
did that
funny
comment
how
make you
this
feel when they
that
said
made
share
me
your story with the world?
that made me feel nervous because I was like, oh, like this is the thought was kind of like that makes this sound a lot bigger than I was making it. I
Okay,
kept
yeah.
trying to tell myself like, okay,
No big
I'm
deal.
right. It's not going to
Mhm.
be a big deal. I can read and and I was even telling myself I'll stumble over my words and it'll be okay. Even reading,
Mhm.
if you miss a word, whatever, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just read the paper. That's all you have to do. And then, something like that can kind of make me think, oh no, it's more of a big deal, and it's really not.
Right. So you're feeling nervous, but then also in the same day, you're feeling like chill, right? Like,
Right.
so what is your emotion when you think like, it's no big deal, I'm just reading?
Then I feel like kind of
Okay.
excited's maybe too strong a word, but like I'm like positive, like anticipating, or like,
Okay. Hmm.
like I'm like it's something, I have to do, and it's later at night than I'm usually used to being animated and awake.
Yeah.
But it's, I feel like more, I don't know, confident or
Yeah.
capable. We talked about that word the
Yeah.
other day. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm realizing I should add here that a lot of times it is most helpful to make things the most clear if you put one sentence here and a one word emotion here, because you're having many, many thoughts and many, many feelings. But when you want to look at the action and the result, it's best to just separate out. Like, let's just see what the actions you're taking and the result you're creating from one thought and one feeling. Another thing is like, if a thought is a question, either answer the question or flip it to like not be a question anymore.
Mhm.
It depends on the situation, but um, so right, so I would I would give you a pass and say positive anticipation might be one word in a different language. So well, that could go in the feeling line, and then your thought is like, I can read. This will be fine, right? And I would probably narrow it down to just this will be fine. And your circumstances, there's a Zoom at 9:30 on February 16th. The directions are read your story. That somebody stated that somewhere, right? And you could even have your thing written out as another part of the circumstance. Because you're like, I have it printed, right? This will be fine. Positive anticipation. Um, versus I'm sharing this is a lot bigger than I thought and feeling nervous. Okay, that was a good example. Um, Another example I have is items on a to-do list, right? So if you write out your to-do list, there's a couple of different things you could think about it, right? Where it's like, this is way too much. This is way beyond what's humanly possible. There's no way I'm going to be able to get all this done. So those three thoughts would create feelings along the lines of like overwhelm, stress, like depending on the person. And that's why coaching is like highly personal, where if you are the person getting coached, then you're the one going like, how does that feel in my body, right? And then other people might feel a different feeling if they're watching the recording or watching live and getting coached, right? But our brains all kind of work the same way, where it's pretty common to feel overwhelmed by items on a to-do list. Everybody can benefit, right? Versus somebody who's thinking, I know exactly how I'm going to get all this done. We feel confident, capable, motivated. But if you truly believe this is way beyond what's humanly possible, you can't just jump to, I know exactly how I'm going to get all this done, right? And that's where in coaching, I like to create bridge thoughts of like, maybe it's possible I can get most of this done and just walk a little bit closer. And so, yeah, it's the toxic positivity of like, no, we're not just flipping straight to like, I know how I can get all this done. No more negative emotions. It's like being really honest about where you are and what you truly believe. And just finding ways to wiggle that in small ways. Don't have to jump to being completely confident all the time. If you're feeling completely insecure and overwhelmed all the time, that's too big of a jump. Sometimes neutral is even just a nice place to land for a while, right? And then just another example of working with kids, right, is like a diagnosis of ADHD. So diagnosis goes in the circumstance line because a doctor says so, right? It's good enough for me. And so maybe one person's thought about that could be, everything is so difficult with him. I just don't even know how to manage this. This is too complicated. And feel stressed, overwhelmed, resentful, upset, depending on how their body responds to those thoughts. And then I feel like maybe a school psychologist or a counselor, or I feel like I'm even getting there after working with kids for 10 years. It's like, oh, I know all the tips and tricks of how to work with his brain. This is going to be fine. This is easy. Or I can't wait to get to know this particular client and how to help him, right? So I hope this is helpful to see like the circumstances and the facts are completely neutral. The power comes in you get to choose what you want to think about it. And also you can't just be superwoman and jump from point Z to point A. That's way too far away, right? Okay. Anybody else want to get stories and facts separated out? No? Okay. So I have a little maximize your learning challenge at the end of each class. So it's kind of homework. So in the next week, and everything is optional in coaching. It's just an option. Even my best advice or recommendations is just an option. It's 4 steps, 2 N's and 2 C's. Okay. So it's notice your emotions. And let me say real quick, do you know where to find your emotions? They're not in your brain. Your emotions are in your body. And I used to think, and I saw an Instagram post, I think it was from Every Thought Captive Coaching, where she said, you can't think your feelings, you have to feel your feelings to process them. And I think we do like, I'm feeling worried, so I'm going to think about everything that's making me worried. And you're just feeding the worry. But you feel your emotions in your body. That means like, my chest is heavy. My hands feel tingly. I feel like I want to cry. I feel like energetic, like in my limbs of just like, I gotta go do stuff now, motivated, right? So first step is notice your emotions. So your body is feeling a certain way. Name the emotion. And there are 97,000 feeling wheels on the internet. So if you're like, I feel happy, right? There's the 4 that I teach the kindergartners of happy, sad, mad, scared. But then there's a whole wheel of like, let's get this more specific: joyful, hopeful, discouraged, disappointed, right? Nervous, anxious. And so, we all have Google at our fingertips all the time, right? um, so notice your emotion in your body, name your emotion to the best of your ability. Feel free to Google, and then see if you can connect that emotion to the thought that it's coming from, right? And then the last step is you can choose if you want to keep it or not. If you don't want to keep that thought, then you can bring it to coaching. If you do want to keep it because you're like, no, I am really disappointed about this, and that's not going to change. I feel disappointed. You can still bring it to coaching, and we'll talk about processing that emotion and working through it and not just having it hang around for the next 7 years, right? Because that's a real thing. Like, I have seen people get coached on circumstances that happened 20 years ago, but your thought about it is happening right now, and your feeling about it is happening right now. And so you can choose if you want to keep it or not 20 years from now, right? But that's the homework. Notice your emotion, name your emotion, connect it to a thought if you can, and then choose if you want to keep that thought or not. Because sometimes too, it might be like, I am feeling so angry because he's being such a jerk. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to keep believing that he's a jerk. I want to believe the best of him. I want to, have a more like compassionate, curious attitude towards the situation. Because, spoiler alert, anytime you're thinking something mean right here, your result is going to be, I'm super mean. It might just be to yourself, it might be to the other person, but your thoughts are reflected in your results, which we will talk about more later. But yeah. So, any questions before I shut it down for the night? Okay. Cool. You're muted, but it looks like you said something.
I said, no, that was good. What were you going to say, Jeff?
He said no.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was
Cool.
really good. I like those 4
Cool.
things at the end to practice. I think that'll be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've downloaded emotion wheels.
Yeah. There you
Yeah,
go.
with like 78, the big wheel.
The big one. And you don't have to go out to all the layers. It's okay. You don't get extra points for finding a fancier emotion.
Obscure emotion.
Yes, it doesn't have to be obscure, right?
I'm exhilarated.
If you truly feel sad, you feel sad. That's fine, right? But it's just finding the vocabulary for like, no, this time I'm disappointed. This time I'm discouraged. This time I'm resentful. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to cough up a lung. Thank you so much for coming, and I'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.